So I will then walk you through some of the changes that has happened in the 2 recent editions of the protocol. As you can see here, since the last summit, we have had 2 new editions in the protocol, Paris and Lyon, and I will walk you through what those are. I will start just on the historical look on what editions we have had previously and our frequency of deliveries. And then I will go into the details of the Paris edition and the Lyon edition, and then I will just mention briefly about the future editions. So, protocol editions in the open source Eiffel community and protocol. So as you might know, I think Christopher mentioned it in the morning, Eiffel was first open sourced in 2016. First half of 2016, May actually. Sorry, April maybe. And since then we have had a few editions. We had the Bordeaux edition, the first official one in 2017. We have Toulouse in 2018, Agen also in 2018 in the autumn, and then we made a patch version of Agen early 2019. And then we had the summit there around 2020, middle of that year. And since then we have had 2 new editions, Paris and Lyon. Paris was released February this year, and Lyon is actually not yet released. It's defined but not released. It will probably be released in the few coming weeks. But I anyway mentioned the content since it's set now. So the Paris edition updates then. I will go into some details on the later slides, but first just overview of everything. So we have 2 event definition updates on the composition defined event and on the artifact published event. And we have 2 documentation updates. We added a glossary and we also made some miscellaneous corrections and updates to our documents. You can see the full diff when you get this presentation afterwards. You can go in and see all commits that has been updated on the repository for this edition. So going into some details of the Paris edition then. In the composition defined event, we have the element type link. Previously, that element link could point to source change submitted events or other composition defined events or artifact created events. But with this change that came in Paris then, we also added the possibility to target a source change created event. That will make it possible to create baselines or compositions for, so to say, pre-merge commits in your repositories before things have been merged or submitted into the master branch of your repository. Next change is about the name qualifier to artifact published. I can open the web page describing this. So this is the artifact published event. And with this edition, we added the name parameter to the locations object, so the name property. It's optional, it's a string, and it will identify the name of the file in the artifact for which this location provides the URI. It needs to correspond to a file information.name parameter from the artifact created event to make a match. That's that change. And then we have created the Eiffel Glossary. We often get questions on what does this term mean and so on in Eiffel. So with this edition, we also added some definitions of different terms. What is an activity? What is the artifact? What is a composition, conference level, and so on. So these can be used for reference when talking about these different terms. It's located in the Eiffel protocol repository in GitHub. You can reach it from the start page in the table of contents down here in the start page of the repository. There is the Eiffel Glossary. You can reach it. And that's about the Paris edition. And then the Lyon edition, which is not yet released, but it's defined, as I just mentioned. We have 3 new event definition updates to the logs objects in different event types. We have an update to the environment defined event, and we have a general update to all links objects in all events. And along with the last one here, we have also, not along with that, but we have also clarified the naming convention for link types. So another link type update, but documentation wise. Again, the full diff can be seen here. So going into some details about these changes then. We've added the media type and tags properties to the logs objects in these different events: activity finished, activity started, test case finished, test case started, test suite finished, test suite started. So these 6 events have log objects in them. And now these log objects can contain 2 new parameters. The media type, which corresponds to normal media types in any URI you would expect. You can state here if it's a text file or if it's an XML file or MP3 file or whatever kind of file it is, which can be used then of course for sorting and for retrieving specific types of logs that you're interested in. You can also specify arbitrary tags. It's a list, an array of strings, free text strings. So you can define whatever tag you would like to put on your log so that your consumers can understand what is this log about, what kind of log is it. That is new in the just soon coming edition, Lyon. Another change is that we've now added the possibility to provide a so-called runtime environment link in the environment defined event. Previously, we had a data.image entry in the environment defined event. It was supposed to be a URI string, but we didn't have the possibility to connect it to an actual an image created by an artifact created event. So now we've added this runtime environment link type to the environment defined event, with which we can then point to an artifact created, which would then represent the actual image created through some CI pipeline somewhere or some build pipeline handled by events. So we can, with this change, we will have even more possibilities to describe the full chain of activities also for our images that are used when creating the environments for example, building or testing later on in the pipeline. We've added the domain ID to all links objects. And first, before I go into what it looks like, maybe just need to mention what a domain is, because it's not very commonly known everywhere. So a domain is actually an infrastructure topological concept. It can be used to define different namespaces for different events. You can send events in different domains for different namespaces due to whatever reasons you would like. And it's an optional field you can specify in any event in the meta.source.domainid parameter. Let's say domain, and now we've added to each links object. It's possible to define what domain this event was sent in. So what namespace it was sent in, or what the area it was sent in. Previously we had only the type and the target, but now we've added the domain ID as well. And the reason is to make it easier to look up where is the details of these events. If you just have the target ID, it could be hard to know, depending on what your infrastructure for Eiffel looks like. If you have an infrastructure that is divided into multiple domains, it is hard to know just based on the target UID here, where that event is sent. So if you would, for example, have different persistent stores in different domains, it's hard to know where to go to find the different events that are sent. Now with this, it's possible to define the domain ID within the actual link itself, which makes it then easier to find the exact event contents. We've also added a naming convention for link types. We haven't really changed any link types. We already followed this naming convention before, but now it's explicitly stated what the naming convention is. It was more implicit before. So link types shall have names that fit the pattern. Target event is the source's event's link type. And to exemplify that, we can say this source change corresponding to an SSE event is the composition's element, or this activity is the test suite's context, or this environment is the artifact's environment. So these are the link types, and this is how you would read. When you see such a link, you can read them this way. So, last but not least, about future editions. We got that question earlier in the summit. We haven't defined any editions yet. We have pull requests in the pipe, and we have a lot of issues in the pipe that we would like to solve, but we haven't mapped them to any future edition yet. I know that we will most probably would like to have a new edition late this year, or maybe early next year, because we have needs in Ericsson that I know of, where we would need an updated edition quite soon. And any one of you is welcome to propose contents for these future editions. As you saw in one of the first slides, we have had like one edition per year, or sometimes 2 editions per year. I think and I hope that this will be a bit more frequent in the future. So I would expect that we will have probably 2 editions per year, at least. Okay, any questions on these specific editions or generally about editions?
Kenneth here, and then sorry, I have some questions. Like, how I realized that old edition, like you have the name from France, like a city. So so I'm just wondering, like, is how do we make the decision that like this is Lyon, like here is Paris, and is that something that like you had a conference in Lyon, then you say, oh, something like a Lisbon Treaty or like Lyon version or something like that? How do you come up with that?
It's a good question. These names were, or the naming standard for these editions was actually set by Daniel Ståhl some years ago when Eiffel was the first open sourced. And the reason behind the names is that these are cities or locations where Gustave Eiffel has donated or put his artwork. So as you know, the Eiffel Tower in Paris, that's his work, and in all these different cities there are also different sculptures or works by Gustave Eiffel. We will quite soon run out actually of such locations or cities, so then we need to find another naming convention for them. But it's just a name. It doesn't mean anything else, and it's just a name, something to talk about. It doesn't have any other meaning connected to the protocol itself.
Okay, good to know. So it's related to the Eiffel Tower then?
Yeah, or the man behind the Eiffel Tower, yeah.
All right.
Hi, Emil.
Hi.
So since you have described about this domain ID in the links object, will it be removed from the meta source completely, or it is available both in meta source as well as in the links object?
Oh yeah, it will still be in the meta source. So of course, in the event you send, you will have it in the meta source.domain ID. That will not change, and because it needs to correspond to that. And then if you the next event you send, where you want to link to some earlier event, then you optionally can include the domain ID of that event that you reference, which then had the meta source domain ID in its own body or meta object. So we will not remove the meta source domain ID when you send events, but we will instead also add the possibility to provide it when you link to an event. Because when you link to it, you probably know which domain it was sent in. And to help the consumers of your events, it will then be a lot easier for them to find the actual event content if you also provide what domain it was sent in. Did that answer your question, Santosh?
Yes, thanks.
Perfect. More questions?
And the other thing about this, the general definition that you explained about the events, that activity refers to certain activity events, that is applicable from Bordeaux, or is it just applicable from Paris edition?
Which definitions did you mean? In the glossary or no?
Yeah, in the glossary, yes.
Okay, sorry. This okay. The thing is that it was created under the I maybe removed it. So if you would browse the repository with an earlier edition than the latest one, here you can select different versions when browsing in GitHub. If I, for example, would choose edition Toulouse here, oh, for some reason that didn't work. Strange. Take another one then. Jean, maybe? No. Why is this not possible?
It's because the file is not existing.
Yeah, exactly. That's the reason. So again, I choose Toulouse here. If I look at the table of contents, I will not see the glossary here. So you need to choose a later edition, Paris or Lyon, to be able to view the glossary. Then you will see the glossary. But of course, it's the same. I wouldn't say that the definitions have changed since early Eiffel. It's just that we provided them in the repository from that version on, or that edition on.
Yeah. But even if we are providing it in Paris, these definitions are applicable to Asian and Bordeaux as well.
It will be most probably be applicable for all older editions as well, and of course all future editions, unless we change anything, and then it will be changed for a certain edition, but I don't see that we would change it. I know that we will actually add we will add the domain term here as well now when we release the Lyon edition, together with providing the domain ID link there. So the domain will also be a term if you look at the glossary from Lyon on.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions.